I'm going to read a very, very short piece first. It's called "You Cannot Choose Your Parents, but You Can Choose Your Ancestors." A fleeting glimpse into my family tree. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. It was Coleridge who wrote something to the effect that one would have to be a stone, not to be influenced by others, but the trick is to assimilate these various influences and hopefully find one's own voice. I have little doubt that there are many authors who have, in one way or the other, helped to give shape to my sensibility and writing. But if you were to ask me exactly how those influences are reflected in my work, I would be stymied for an answer. Yeah, Antara, come this side here.
I can see.
Huh? You're craning your neck. And I'm told I'm very good looking.
You are. I can see you. What cleaning of neck is calling you?
Okay, sorry. Okay. Besides, it's not only writers or artists who influence one. There are one's teachers, the chance encounter, an offhand remark, and who knows what else. Indeed, one of the most underrated and understudied phenomena in art criticism is the role of accidental factors and sheer happenstance. But there's something else that has proven to be just as important to my writing. One of the lessons I have learned in the course of my literary life is that while you're not at liberty to choose your parents, you can choose your ancestors. The bond between me and my chosen forefathers has been one of kinship and not of conscious study and emulation. I discovered that we believed in many of the same values: irreverence, a dislike of solemnity, and a pathological aversion to self-righteousness, a predilection for the subversive, a compulsive need to question received wisdom, and an egalitarian abhorrence of caste and class distinctions. My first ancestor was an aspect of my own culture that we now mostly disown. I have often railed against the Indian obsession with our glorious past, and yet there is a facet of our heritage that I identify with deeply. What I'm talking about is the openness of a mindset from an earlier Indian epoch. There was a time when the West rather superciliously equated Indian temple sculpture and other kinds of art with nothing but erotica. Thank God our artists and their patrons rejoiced in the full range of sensuality and the sexual act and did not subscribe to the artificial dichotomy between the material and the spiritual. They endeavored to encompass the entire human project, the spiritual, the physical, and the intensely philosophical. What is remarkable is that this earlier culture is utterly devoid of shame, guilt, and self-consciousness. Unfortunately, hypocrisy and sanctimoniousness have now replaced the wonderful openness, and we now persecute our artists if they paint a naked goddess or write something which perpetually gives offense and can be turned into political capital. My second forefather was the rich and bawdy legacy of the folk theatre in Maharashtra called Tamasha. Again, my exposure to this variety of theatre was limited to a single play called Garvatse Lagna, the donkey's wedding. I just want to say one thing, an introduction here, which is that, I have been lucky to see Marathi folk theatre, but of course the folk theatre tradition exists all over India, and I really wish we would all go back and soak ourselves in it. It's such a rich tradition anyway. The British may have disapproved of our heathen gods, our elaborate treatises on sex, etc. But the tamasha in my state was killed by the hypocrisy and prudery of the middle class and the government-sponsored censor boards, which were created after independence. The tamasha form is a loose mix, as you know, of various theatre traditions, song and dance, political commentary, the follies and foibles of mankind. Its staple is humour of every variety: broad farce, double entendre, satire, outrageously tasteless sexual innuendo, body and sharp wit, improvisation. Nobody spared, not the political leaders, not the saints, not the frauds, hypochondriacs and quacks, the philanderers and the misogynists. Political correctness is altogether missing, and the women get it as good as the menfolk. The tamasha writers, improvisers and actors have a whale of a time sending up the gods and exposing their shenanigans, especially of those of Lord Sri Krishna, who has 16,000 wives and mistresses, as you know. But you never for a moment forget that they can take such liberties only because their faith is unshakable and they are at ease and peace with their gods. My own predilection, as seen from the very beginning in my very first novel, Satsakantre Choice, 7/6/43, was towards acute black humor, though I tended to switch constantly between the tragic and the brilliantly comic. And when I followed it up with my play Bedtime Story, it became even clearer that what I shared with the Tamasha tradition, and come to think of it, with one of my French ancestors, none other than Rabelais himself, was a joie de vivre and an appetite for life that bordered on sheer and simple gluttony. Nothing that dealt with human life was taboo. There was open house for sex, bodily functions, friendship, human relationships, the works. The only precondition was that whether it was lust, erotica, meditation, fast, or what have you, it had to be germane to the characters and the situation and never something imposed from the outside. The third of my kindred souls is a rather different kettle of fish. It's the notion of bhakti, or personal and mystical equation with God. It's all those wonderful mystical saint poets of the subcontinent, and in truth from all over the world, regardless of their religion. It still takes me aback to find that a feckless and irreligious person like me feels so close to them, and to rediscover almost daily how significant and relevant they are to our lives and to our times. And yet I have to confess that I had no idea what intense emotion they could arouse in me till I started writing Kakru. Not even in my remotest fantasies had I envisaged that I would write what, at least superficially and only superficially, is a historical novel. But far more far-fetched than that was the risible idea that I would write about Meera, the royal princess of Mewar in the current state of Rajasthan, a woman saint who bore the pangs of me. Well, dear Meera made me eat my words. I wrote a 609-page novel about her husband, but throughout she's at the death center of it. And how grateful I am to her for showing me that I too am continually a victim of stereotypes. And then I wrote God's Little Soldier, where I tried to reimagine very briefly the life of Kabir, one of the most remarkable mystic poet saints of India. One of the most disheartening developments associated with the 20th century, and recorded music in particular, has been the commercialization of spirituality and mysticism. Regardless of the Fortune 500 companies, God has been and will always be the world's biggest industry. But that kind of cynical exploitation cannot sully the likes of Kabir, Rumi and the other mystic saints. In truth, it has been one of my secret ambitions to get Kabir sung as hardcore rock and roll by a group like the Beatles or A.R. Rahman, so that even Hindu fundamentalists and the Taliban will have Kabir on their lips and realize that there is only one God and her name is life.